It was supposed to be the happiest day of her life. The bride had dreamed about her wedding since she was a little girl. She imagined walking down the aisle, holding her partner's hand, and smiling through tears of joy. The decorations were perfect. The guests were dressed beautifully. The music played softly. But something felt wrong from the moment the day began. Her husband, the man she loved, was acting strange. He didn't look at her with love. He didn't smile like he used to. He avoided her eyes. She tried to hold his hand before the ceremony, but he quickly pulled away. At first, she thought he was just nervous. Maybe the stress was getting to him. But during the event, things got worse. His family didn't treat her with warmth. They smiled in front of others, but behind her back, she heard small comments. Someone whispered, "She's just the baby carrier." It hit her like a slap. Did they only invite her into the family because she was pregnant? Did they not see her as a real wife, just a tool? Still, she stayed calm. She told herself not to ruin the moment. But deep down, her heart was breaking. Then came the wedding reception. Everyone was seated, enjoying food and conversation. It was time for speeches. The groom stood up and took the mic. He began talking about family, future, and responsibilities. He thanked his parents, his friends, even the wedding planner. But when he looked at her, his wife, he smiled coldly and said, "And of course, we thank her for being the baby carrier." The room went silent. Some guests laughed awkwardly. Others looked shocked. The bride froze in her seat. Her face turned pale. That was how he saw her. Not a partner, not a wife, not someone he loved. Just a carrier for his child. She looked around. No one stopped him. No one said anything. In that moment, she realized something important. This wedding was never about love. It was about image, pressure, and control. The man standing next to her had just humiliated her in front of everyone, and didn't even notice the pain in her eyes. They met at a friend's birthday party. He was polite, charming, and seemed to know exactly what to say. He made her feel special, like she was the only woman in the room. They started talking every day. Long calls, sweet messages, surprise gifts. It felt like a real love story. Within months, they were in a serious relationship. He said he wanted a future with her. She believed him. When she found out she was pregnant, she was scared, but also happy. She thought he would be excited too. At first, he acted supportive. He said, "We'll get through this together." But slowly, his attitude began to change. He became distant. He started treating her like someone who had just added pressure to his life. He didn't ask how she felt, didn't go with her to doctor visits, and hardly showed any care. His family didn't react kindly to the news either. They never accepted her fully. They would say things like, "At least the baby will carry our name." She smiled through it all, hoping things would get better. But deep inside, she was already feeling used and unimportant. Then he brought up the idea of a quick wedding. "Let's just do it before people start talking," he said. It wasn't a proposal. It was a plan, a decision made without love or excitement. She felt confused, but agreed, because she wanted the baby to grow up in a proper home. She told herself things would improve after marriage. In the days leading up to the wedding, she noticed more signs. He never talked about the future with her. He only talked about the baby, the house, and his work. There were no loving texts anymore, no moments of laughter, just cold planning. His mother took over most of the wedding details. She picked the dress, the guest list, even the seating plan. The bride started to feel like a background character in her own wedding. But she kept quiet. She told herself she was doing this for the baby. She never imagined that behind all the smiles, there was no real love. Just a plan where she was not a partner, but just someone doing a job, carrying a baby for them. The wedding day looked beautiful from the outside. The flowers were fresh, the guests were smiling, and the pictures looked perfect. But behind those smiles, the bride was holding in her pain. She had been trying to stay strong, hoping that things would get better once they were officially married. She believed maybe after the ceremony, he would finally look at her with love again. But he didn't. During the entire day, he barely touched her. When they walked down the aisle together, his hand felt stiff, like he was holding a stranger's hand. During the photos, he smiled for the camera, but never for her. He seemed more focused on speaking to his family and friends than spending any time with his bride. She tried to stay calm. She didn't want to cause a scene on such an important day. Every time someone asked, "Are you okay?" she forced a smile and said, "Just tired." But deep down, her heart was cracking. Then came the reception. All the guests were seated, the food had been served, and it was time for speeches. She felt a small wave of hope, thinking maybe her husband would say something kind about her. Maybe he would thank her for being there, for carrying their child, for standing by his side. He stood up, holding the microphone. At first, his words were polite. He thanked his parents for their support. He joked with his friends and thanked them for showing up. Then he turned to her. She looked up at him, waiting. He smiled, but not with love, and said, "And of course, let's all thank her for being the baby carrier." The room went silent. A few people gave nervous laughs, thinking maybe it was just a joke. But she knew it wasn't. That was how he saw her. Not as a wife. Not as a woman with dreams, feelings, and love. Just someone carrying his child. She felt the sting of those words like a slap across the face. Her hands shook. Her eyes filled with tears. But she blinked them away quickly. All eyes were on her now. Some people whispered. Others looked away. And in that moment, she knew this wasn't love. This was humiliation. And she couldn't stay silent anymore. The room was quiet after his cruel words. She sat there, frozen, her heart beating so fast it felt like it would explode. Her hands were cold, her cheeks burning with embarrassment. People were staring, waiting to see how she would react. Her husband had gone back to his seat, looking proud, as if what he said was perfectly fine. She looked down at her hands. For a moment, she thought about staying silent, but then something inside her woke up, a fire she had been holding back for too long. She stood up slowly, walked toward the microphone, and picked it up with shaky hands. Her voice was soft at first. "I wasn't going to say anything tonight," she said, "but I think I have to." Everyone turned to her. Even her husband looked surprised. She looked directly at the crowd. "I'm not just a baby carrier," she said louder this time. "I'm a woman, a person, someone who loved this man deeply, even when he didn't love me back." Gasps filled the room. She continued, "You all see this perfect wedding, but what you don't see is how I was treated behind closed doors, how I was ignored, used and made to feel small, how his family never truly accepted me, how he stopped treating me like a partner the moment I got pregnant." She paused, holding back tears. "He didn't marry me out of love," she said. "He married me because I was having his child, and that's all he cared about. Today he stood here and reduced me to a function, not a person. And I refuse to let that be my story." The room was silent. Some people nodded. A few even clapped. She looked at her husband. "You embarrassed me in front of everyone, but now I'm telling the truth in front of them too. I gave everything to this relationship, and you gave me nothing but shame." Her voice didn't shake anymore. She felt strong. She had taken the moment he tried to destroy her and turned it into her power. With one deep breath, she handed the mic back. The room was still quiet, but something had changed. She was no longer the silent bride. She was the woman who stood up and spoke her truth. After she spoke, the room stayed silent. No one knew what to say. Some people looked shocked. Others lowered their eyes in shame. Her husband sat frozen in his chair, not expecting her to speak out. For the first time in a long time, she felt free, like the heavy weight on her chest had finally lifted. She didn't cry. She didn't scream. She simply walked back to her table, picked up her bag, and stood tall. Her dress was still glowing under the lights, but this time it wasn't about the dress. It was about her strength. She turned to the guests, gave a small nod, and walked out of her own wedding with quiet dignity. Outside, the night was calm. The air was cool, and the stars were shining. She sat in her friend's car and let out a deep breath. Her friend looked at her with tears in her eyes and said, "I'm proud of you." She nodded, still holding herself together. She didn't go back to that house. She stayed with a friend for a few days, and during that time, she thought about everything. The lies, the silence, the way she had lost herself just to please someone else. And she made a decision. A week later, she filed for divorce. She didn't want her child to grow up in a home where love was fake and respect didn't exist. She chose peace over pain. She chose herself. Her days were hard at first. Pregnancy alone wasn't easy. But slowly, things got better. She found support, met kind people, and started rebuilding her life. She took small jobs, saved money, and prepared for her baby's arrival with strength and grace. She no longer cared about what people said behind her back. She had already faced her worst moment and walked through it with her head held high. Her child was born into a home full of love, safety, and honesty, the kind of home she never had with her husband. And every time she looked in the mirror, she reminded herself, she was never just a baby carrier. She was a mother, a warrior, and a woman who refused to be silenced.